Right now, what the Ukrainian armed forces did near Pokrovsk has turned everything upside down in that direction. The bloody rout on the Pokrovsk front has crushed the Kremlin's army. No one expected anything like this. The Ukrainian armed forces have achieved the impossible. The bunker dweller is losing Donbas while Ukraine's army advances. Trump and Xi against Putin. A new world alliance without Russia. The Kremlin is no longer a player, but a pawn in someone else's game. The bunker dweller is out of trump cards. China has made up its mind and struck Russia mercilessly. The US and China are deciding Ukraine's fate. And a crucial decision has already been made that will change the course of the war. A northern nightmare for Putin. NATO is advancing. 15,000 soldiers at Russia's borders. Right at this very moment. The Kremlin is in a panic. Finland has made its move. Putin has given the order. The world is holding its breath. The Russian rear is on fire. Ukrainian drones and missiles are tearing the occupiers apart. The war is at the Kremlin's doorstep. Ukraine is changing the rules of the game. What is the secret of Ukrainian weaponry? All the details coming up. A military crash test for the Kremlin. The southern front has awakened. Planes and weapons are heading to the front lines. The Balkans are bursting into the war in Ukraine and arming the armed forces of Ukraine to the teeth. There is panic in the Kremlin. Ukrainian drones are tearing Russia to pieces. Cheap drones are bringing victory closer not by the day but by the hour. Little iron birds are deciding the outcome of the war. And this latest strike hit the very heart of the Kremlin. All this and more in our program Hotspot. Urgent, Pokrovsk is holding. The legendary city where Russian troops have broken. The armed forces of Ukraine are doing the impossible. The occupying army is drowning in blood. The city is holding strong. The enemy has been reduced to dust. Donbas is turning into a bloody trap for the enemy. Watch all the fiery details right now.
The battles for Zapokrovsk have been raging for over a year. During this time, the occupying army has broken all its teeth but still hasn't taken the city. It's just a stone's throw from here to the end of the southern border of Donetsk region. The Pokrovsk direction is a priority for Putin. He has transferred 120,000 soldiers of his occupying army here.
In the Pokrovsk direction, the occupiers have changed their tactics of conducting combat operations. We're talking about the use of mechanized columns in assaults on the positions of Ukraine's defense forces. Such tactics have not been observed for the past several months, up to half a year. Notably, the change in tactics is primarily related to changes in weather conditions. In other words, the occupiers are counting on the rainy autumn weather to significantly reduce the activity of Ukrainian FPV drones.
Since August of this year, Ukraine's defense forces have not only managed to protect Pokrovsk and the nearby settlements, Ukrainian defenders have liberated almost 183 square
kilometers of territory and cleared another 230 square kilometers of the enemy. At present, there are no grounds to claim full control over the Pokrovsk agglomeration.
In addition, Ukrainian fighters have neutralized at least 13,945 Russian invaders. Of these, 8,402 are irrecoverable losses, 5,419 wounded, and 124 taken prisoner. The occupiers have also lost nearly 1,300 pieces of equipment and weaponry. That
is, we are talking about the use of the so-called no price is too high tactic. The occupiers are well aware that out of all that armored equipment, not just tanks but also IFVs, APCs, at most only up to 20% will actually reach the positions of Ukraine's defense forces. And accordingly, the same proportion applies to the landing troops, meaning manpower. The occupiers use this tactic primarily to achieve political objectives. It's not even about the military aspect. The Russian dictator needs to demonstrate to the United States the supposed tactical successes of the occupying army before the start of negotiations in Hungary.
despite losses and the shortage of personnel, a few days ago an enemy sabotage and reconnaissance group managed to infiltrate the center of Pokrovsk. Local social media channels report that during their advance, the Russians violated international humanitarian law and killed civilian residents of the city. This happened in the area of the railway station. One woman was miraculously saved by a local resident. Unfortunately, the occupiers are increasingly using the residents of Pokrovsk as human shields, or they simply shoot unarmed people right on the streets of their own city. Nevertheless, Ukrainians are holding the defense with dignity and destroying the enemy even as they approach Pokrovsk. In this video, the defenders of Pokrovsk used a single FPV drone to neutralize 10 occupiers at once who were moving at night in a truck near Selidov. The enemy continues to target weak spots and probe Ukrainian defenses. In Mirnohrad-Pokrovsk district, a small group of occupiers broke into the city, but was immediately eliminated by the Ukrainian armed forces.
The difficulty in neutralizing Russian sabotage groups lies in the fact that they use urban infrastructure and B, the local population as a human shield. This is what creates additional problems for Ukraine's defense forces at the moment of neutralizing the Russian assault troops. But it should be noted that according to the Russian side itself, the average life expectancy of a Russian assault trooper is about 12 days.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is convinced that Russia is not interested in developing the occupied areas of Donbas and will use the captured territories only for showpiece actions, under the headline, "We won the war." In addition, the commander-in-chief stated that Ukraine wants to end the war in a just and reliable way.
The US and China have struck at Russia. Trump and Xi have staged a geopolitical upheaval. After a 6-year pause, the US and China have joined forces and thrown Putin overboard from world politics. Trump lowered tariffs, called Xi a great leader, and declared, "We will work together on Ukraine." Watch the explosive details right now.
Donald Trump met with Xi Jinping in South Korea as part of his Indo-Pacific tour. The main topics of the meeting were trade barriers between the countries and, of course, the Russia-Ukraine war.
They moved towards establishing a more forward-looking joint political dialogue agenda, which in principle is a very positive outcome of this meeting.
As a result of the meeting, the parties agreed to reduce the tariff on Chinese goods related to fentanyl, a synthetic opioid analgesic, from 20% to 10%. The overall level of US duties will reach up to 47%.
The fundamental issues underlying the conflict between the US and China have not gone anywhere. And these are very important questions, such as the fate of the island of Taiwan and the possibility of imposing tariffs on Chinese goods, specifically because of the purchase of Russian oil. Well, Trump said that these issues were not raised diplomatically, but in such cases, as a rule, when you don't reach an agreement, you don't reach an agreement. You just say that we didn't talk about it.
The agreements regarding Ukraine were less productive, despite the fact that, according to the US president, Ukraine was discussed at length. Initially, Trump wanted to persuade Xi to reduce support for Russia so that Putin would agree to end the war. It was not announced whether the parties reached any agreement in this regard.
A strategic dialogue of cooperation has been established between authoritarian Russia and authoritarian Beijing. And to risk that, Xi, in return, would have to receive something more substantial and significant, something that would match the high level of relations between America and Beijing. Since, at least for the time being, the relationship is more reminiscent of a logic of de-escalatory actions in the trade and economic sphere. I would not say that at this particular moment between Washington and Beijing. A strategic alliance or dialogue has been established.
Donald Trump rated the meeting a 12 out of 10. By the way, this was the first meeting between the leaders of the US and China in the past 6 years.
Based on the statements we've seen, it looks like tariffs won't be imposed on Chinese goods, and there will be access for American agricultural products. On the surface, the statement sounds good. But how true that really is, again, we remember President Trump's experience, at least Trump's statement that peace had been achieved in the Middle East after 3,000 years. I'm someone who reads news from the Middle East, and what's happening there doesn't even come close to reminding me of peace being achieved in that region. So, Trump's statement that everything has been agreed with China sounds great, but let's at least wait 48 hours and see what happens.
Trump said that he had agreed with Xi Jinping on a visit to China in the spring of next year. After that, a return visit by the Chinese leader to the US will follow.
Finland is deploying troops at the border with Russia. There's panic in Russia, hysteria in the Kremlin. The authorities are creating people's militias. The Kremlin is trembling while the Finnish army is flexing its muscles. 15,000 soldiers, tanks, and artillery. Everything is ready for large-scale exercises right next to Russia. Will there be a response from Putin? We'll tell you right now.
Acting proactively, Finland is deploying 15,000 troops to the border with Russia. The Finns are preparing for the largest series of military exercises of the year. Conscripts, reservists, professional soldiers, as well as units from allied countries Sweden and the United Kingdom will take part. According to the country's ground forces, the purpose of the maneuvers is to test the army's readiness to defend the state and to strengthen cooperation with NATO allies.
This is NATO's response to the aggressive actions of the occupying country. On the territory of the occupying country, directly near Finland's borders, there is currently intensive engineering construction of new military bases by the occupying country's army. This refers to Petrozavodsk, Kandalaksha, and other settlements on the territory of the Russian Federation, which indicate the redeployment of Russian army units directly near Finland's borders.
One of the largest episodes will be the Livelace Sentry exercise, which will take place in southern Finland starting November 27th until December 4th. About 7,000 participants will be involved in it.
The Russian Federation has constantly made it clear to Finland what threat hangs over that country. Moreover, there has been a constant element of military political pressure on Finland with the aim, accordingly, of maintaining so-called neutral status. There is not the slightest reason to say that friendly, good neighborly relations were established after the occupation of Finnish lands. The Russian military presence near Finland's borders has been constantly increasing.
In the spring of 2023, Finland became a member of the North Atlantic Alliance. This provoked a sharp reaction from Russia, worsening bilateral relations. In addition, Finland imposed sanctions against Russia and refused to grant asylum to Russians fleeing mobilization. After that, Putin's lackeys began blaming the Finns for every sin at every opportunity. For example, in September, former ALCO president Dmitry Medvedev decided that Finland was preparing to attack Russia.
After joining NATO under the guise of defensive measures, Helsinki is pursuing a confrontational course, preparing for war with Russia, apparently setting up a springboard for an attack on us.
Moreover, according to him, Russia supposedly legally deserves reparations from the Finns for World War II. He claims that back then the Finns paid far too little, thanks to the goodwill of the Russians.
This is precisely an element of diplomatic and military pressure on Finland. Moreover, similar statements are being made not only regarding Finland, but also accordingly regarding Sweden, specifically about the island of Gotland, and likewise regarding Poland.
Following the alcoholic Medvedev, the chairman of the State Duma Defense Committee, Andrei Kartapolov, also made aggressive statements. He declared, or rather threatened, that Russia is ready to defend itself at any moment since they have everything they need. Medvedev had previously spoken about this as well.
We cannot simply ignore the fact that Finland is currently a member of the North Atlantic Alliance, also known as NATO. This situation predetermines changes in our military approaches, in the arrangement of the border, and in repelling possible unfriendly acts.
The political and military leaders of Finland are doing everything they can to emphasize that an attack by Russia would be an act of suicidal madness.
The Russian Federation is demonstrating its readiness for a direct confrontation with the NATO bloc, and accordingly the first countries that will be in the spotlight. The armies of the occupying country, namely Finland and the Baltic states, are therefore at significant risk. This is also evidenced by the formation of new military units in the Leningrad military district, and accordingly the deployment of military infrastructure directly near the borders with Finland.
Earlier, it became known that Finland had proposed to NATO to establish a new military base on its territory. Helsinki could become a base for large NATO reconnaissance drones.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The war has reached the Russian rear. Ukraine's new weaponry is changing the rules of the game. Strike after strike, Ukraine is taking out enemy military targets. Ukrainian drones and missiles are turning the occupiers' rear into a scorched earth zone. The Ukrainian armed forces are shattering the myth of Russia's inviolability. Such strikes are constantly increasing, and we'll tell you what weaponry is making this possible. Watch now for all the details.
Distances of hundreds or even thousands of kilometers are no obstacle for Ukrainian weapons. Russian oil refineries.
Well, that's it. It's clear. The refineries are fucked. That's obvious even without saying it.
Key facilities of the military-industrial complex and the Russian war machine.
And
recently, in response to ongoing shelling of Ukraine's civilian infrastructure, Ukrainian forces have also begun targeting critical Russian infrastructure.
Where are we going? Now, that's a ride. Yeah, here in Siberia.
When the Kremlin threatens blackouts for Ukrainians, Russians should also prepare for a cold and difficult winter.
If they threaten blackouts, for example, in the capital of Ukraine, the Kremlin should realize that a blackout will also come to the Russian capital.
For a long time, Western allies restricted Ukraine's ability to strike deep into Russian territory. As a result, Ukraine has built up its own long-range arsenal. According to the head of Ukrainian intelligence, Kirill Budanov, today 99% of strikes on Russian oil refineries are carried out with Ukrainian weapons.
At the time when all this started, when people said we were fighting with one hand tied behind our back, I tend to agree with your opinion that this is the right interpretation of what was happening then. But now we have our own production, and it is precisely our domestic production that has given us the ability to use our forces and resources the way we see fit. The Kremlin understands only the language of force. The best argument in any negotiations with Moscow is a powerful Ukrainian army and military-industrial complex. In particular, our own production of long-range drones and missiles, with which Ukraine regularly strikes targets in Russia located thousands of kilometers or more from the front line.
In order to somehow bring this war to a stalemate, to shift it, we need to learn not only to repel enemy attacks on the front line, but also to suppress their logistics and their aviation. That's why these capabilities were needed. And I'm not even mentioning the necessity of striking military-industrial complex facilities and Russia's energy system.
This is Belgorod. Basically, it's a mess here. There's no electricity anywhere in Belgorod at all.
If the simplest drones to manufacture are used for strikes on Russian oil refineries, jet-powered drones are better suited for targeting military-industrial complex facilities, like the Polyanitia, Peklo, and Bars types. Their technical specifications are not disclosed. Experts suggest that the range of these jet-powered drones is between 500 and 700 kilometers. The main advantage is their low cost compared to their
competitors are individuals or organizations that operate in the same industry or market, striving to achieve similar goals and attract the same customers, which encourages businesses to continuously improve their products and services. So now for dessert, let's take a moment to enjoy something sweet and delicious.
Ukrainian long-range missiles are in store for the occupiers, Long Neptunes and Flamingos. With a range of 1,000 and 3,000 kilometers respectively, the Ukrainian Pink Bird, in addition to its enormous range, impresses with a warhead weighing about 1,000 kilograms.
Usually, the warhead of a modern cruise missile is 450, but at most 500 kilograms. As a rule, almost all missiles have a 450 kilogram warhead. So what does a 1-ton warhead provide? If it hits a target, for example, an industrial facility, 2 such missiles will completely disable it for at least a year. That is, there will be a single crater about 20 meters in diameter.
Russian terrorists who are relentlessly shelling Ukrainian cities must realize that a retaliatory mirrored strike in response is absolutely inevitable.
The Balkans are entering the war against Russia. Military aid is rushing to Kyiv. Planes and weapons are already on their way. Kosovo and Athens are ready to arm Ukraine to the teeth. Don't miss it. Next, exclusive details about the contribution of Balkan countries to Ukraine's victory.
Recently, Ukraine received a new substantial package of military aid from Croatia. Ukraine and Croatia have also agreed on joint weapons production. Ukraine's Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal and Croatia's Defense Minister Ivan Anušić signed a joint letter of intent to deepen defense industrial cooperation.
He thanked Croatia for providing 13 packages of military aid worth over 200 million euros. We expect the 14th aid package soon and the 15th by the end of this year. During the meeting, we also discussed joint participation in the SAVE mechanism and the possibility of Croatia joining the Pearl initiative. We are grateful for considering this matter. Denis Shmyhal, Minister of Defense of Ukraine.
Already at the beginning of next year, the countries will hold a joint industrial forum for defense product manufacturers. Of course, Croatia is most interested in the production of various drones, which have already revolutionized modern warfare. The Croatian side will also assist Ukraine in the issue of demining territories.
I noted Croatia's role in the work of the demining coalition. The experience of this friendly country is important for clearing our land. The Croatian company Docking has already delivered 69 demining machines and has started producing spare parts in Ukraine. Denis Shmyhal, Minister of Defense of Ukraine.
Greece will soon supply Ukraine with American-made M110A2 howitzers, 150,000 units of ammunition, and Zuni rockets. This military aid, with a total value of about 199 million euros, will be delivered to Ukraine through the Czech Republic. Greece, under pressure from other NATO countries, may also sell some of its fighter jets. Mirage 2000. Greece has already purchased 24 more modern Rafale fighter jets from France. And considering that technical support for the M2005 fighters will end in 2027, Greece is looking to get rid of the old ones. However, negotiations with India over the sale of these fighter jets have reached a deadlock. And other Balkan countries have also not found any interested buyers. Greece is negotiating with France to acquire another 6 to 12 Rafale fighter jets. It is not seeking a price reduction in exchange for the sale of part of the 2000. Now, Athens is negotiating with France to acquire another 6 to 12 Rafales and is arranging for a lower price in exchange for selling part of its Mirage 2000 fleet to Ukraine. Currently, Greece has 25 such aircraft in service. The United States is putting pressure on the country to purchase more weapon systems as part of the Priority Needs List program for Ukraine. Therefore, the purchase of some Mirage 2000s from Athens by Kiev is only a matter of time. Even the partially recognized Republic of Kosovo is helping Ukraine. Pristina has announced the delivery of a new package of military aid to Ukraine. The Balkan country is ready to help as much as it can. The details of the aid are not being disclosed. It is known that it includes mortar shells of various calibers. This includes 120mm, 60mm, and 81mm mortar rounds, military trucks, armored vehicles, and tactical vehicles.
We are determined to support Ukraine in every way possible, according to our conditions and capabilities. Ejup Makadonsi, Minister of Defense of Kosovo.
The Minister of Defense of Kosovo published a video on social media showing Kosovo security forces and the British Army training Ukrainian soldiers. Eastern European countries and the Balkans are actively assisting Ukraine with various types of weaponry and by conducting training sessions on their own territory. Such support clearly demonstrates their attitude toward the Russian world and Putin.
An incredible drone catastrophe for Russia. Ukraine is destroying hundreds of Russian targets with cheap innovations. Ukrainian drones are turning the war into a bloody rout of the enemy. Russian forces are in chaos. Small technologies, huge victory for Ukraine.
At speeds of over 300 kilometers per hour. These are the movement parameters of the Ukrainian interceptor drone Sting. The main goal of this little machine is to destroy Russian Shaheds, which the Kremlin is unleashing on Ukraine by the hundreds. Sting is a completely Ukrainian military industry product. Its cost is about $2,500, which is several times cheaper than Russian Shaheds. This is what makes this interceptor drone indispensable for Ukrainian air defense. Just a year ago, this method of shooting down Shaheds was unrealistic. Now, however, everything has changed dramatically.
What once seemed laughable has turned into an inexpensive and crucial element of Ukraine's defense. While Russia bombards its cities with increasingly powerful waves of explosive drones, Ukraine is more and more often using cheap interceptors to stop them. This weapon shot down 150 strike drones during one recent bombardment. Now Ukraine aims to produce 1,000 interceptors.
One of the world's leading news outlets, Business Insider, writes that Sting-type interceptor drones, which Ukraine is now actively producing, could turn the tide of the war because they cost much.
Missiles, and these interceptor drones, which cost about 10 times less in fact than others, are impressive. The price of a strike drone itself, which is a type of unmanned aerial vehicle that is sent to attack either a civilian or a military target, has directly led to the scaling up and increased adoption of such solutions in recent years. Since
the beginning of 2024, Ukrainian drone engineers and developers have actively started converting quadcopters into drones capable of destroying Shaheds.
The designs of interceptor drones are rapidly evolving. For example, the Sting is equipped with a warhead that accelerates to 340 kilometers per hour using 4 rotating blades. This sensor-guided interceptor, produced by the Ukrainian drone manufacturer Wild Hornets, resembles a handheld missile, and it's small enough to fit in a travel bag. Other interceptors look like small gliders. The crews launching them need to react to threats instantly. A Sting pilot said that his team heads out at night based on intelligence tips with only 10 minutes to act, to intercept incoming Russian drones before they move out of range.
The improvement of interceptor drones never stops, not even for a minute. Success rates range from 30% for some interceptors to 80% or even 90%. Success depends on a large number of factors: the type of targets, interception timing, pilot skills, and many others. Interest in and demand for interceptors has surged sharply not only in Ukraine but also among NATO countries. After the first Russian drones crossed the Polish border, especially since the Kremlin continues to invest huge sums in the development and production of strike drones. Shahed, Ukraine and NATO countries want to have an effective and, most importantly, inexpensive countermeasure.
We are currently negotiating with some fairly major and influential leaders. Certain segments in the world, companies that are interested in purchasing our drones, some technologies, for example, that we have adopted from foreign partners we have worked with, are integrated into our solutions and are of interest. It's significant because we have the largest, unfortunately for us, but fortunately for the world, and for those who manufacture weapons, the largest testing ground in the world of military technologies.
During one of the latest attacks on Ukraine, Russia launched almost 800 aerial targets. And according to Western intelligence estimates, the Kremlin may soon launch up to 2,000 Shahed drones of various modifications. Moreover, in Russia, the Shahed is being modernized, and in the future, it may be able to reach speeds of up to 300 kilometers per hour. So, the appearance of Ukrainian interceptor drones should simplify and make air defense operations more effective. Moreover, from a financial standpoint, Ukrainian interceptors are cost-effective to use, and victory in war always comes down to economically advantageous decisions.